Today we're going to be talking about the differences between Spielberg's Ready Player One movie and Ernest Cline's Ready Player One book. Was Spielberg correct in making changes, or should he have stayed with the original source material? One of the first main differences we're going to talk about between the book and the movie is the beginning of the movie. In the book, Ready Player One, it talks about how every morning Wade wakes up from his trailer, he goes down, he walks to the junk pile, he gets into his van and puts on his headset so he can go to high school. They don't talk about school at all in the movie, but in the book, it is very integral to his quest. Being at high school, sitting there, listening to his teachers talk, he realizes the first clue for the first key of the contest, which is actually on the planet Ludus where he's stuck. In the book, while he's playing the game, he is unable to leave the planet of Ludus because he has no money. In the movie, he's hopping left, right, up, down. He's all over the place. Where in the book, he's stuck on this school planet because there's nothing else he can afford to do because it costs true, real money to transport to a different place. But because he's stuck at school, that gives him the opportunity to figure out the clue where the first gate is going to be in the book. Nathan, what did you think about that difference between the book and the movie? Because I know you haven't read the book like Drew and I have.
Yeah, I actually really like the concept of going to school like in virtual reality. I think that's really cool. And I actually think like, in real life, you could have a much better education if you're just learning from these experts, right? So I think what he's doing is kind of cool. And as a kid who has nothing, like that gives him some opportunity and some reason to care about being there. The Oasis means something to him. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, that was kind of shocking when I first watched the movie that they start off with this race to get to the first gate and all that stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? I don't remember reading that. And, you know, it's a lot different. You know, he has to go on like a D&D quest to find the gate here. And I understand why they made that change. It's visually not appealing to have him playing Joust on an Atari system.
So a quick rundown of the book. Parzival goes to this D&D world underground that's on the planet of Ludus. And he runs into this Demilich that is supposed to... Demiliches suck souls out of characters. So he's expecting as a low-powered player, level 3, I think he is at this time, that he's just going to die. And he's like, I challenge you to a joust. And actual joust arcade cabinet pops up and the two of them are playing. So just off the top, you know, thinking of that, can you think of this being that looks like death with bony fingers and everything playing next to this kid who's kind of dressed up in futuristic clothing and stuff like that, and they're just sitting there going click, 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 click. If anyone who's played Joust, you realize that's all you do is flap your wings the entire time. You get blisters on your fingers playing the game. But anyway, that's how he wins the key for the first gate. Mm-hmm. Where in the movie, it's just some weird race that he ends up having to go backwards, which again was a cool twist, but
it was necessary to make that
visually,
change. Because
visually it was probably a little bit better.
You're not going to want to sit there and go, okay, that was kind of lame. So I understand why they made the change that they made, but yeah, I found it very interesting in the book that he goes to high school in the Oasis, and you can be whatever you want to be there. You can look the way you want to look. You can study what you want to study. So it was kind of a neat change, but I do wish that the movie kind of went in on that a little bit more, because it really, you get to know Wade a little bit better, understanding his stature in life of where he's at. You get that he lives in a stack of trailers that are 40 stories high, but you know, getting his education through the Oasis instead of going to a public school, I think you kind of get a little better idea of who he is and why it's so important that he wins this.
Mm-hmm. I think the movie downplayed how important the Oasis is to the world. Mm-hmm. That the Oasis dollar is the highest currency in the world in the book. If you have 1 million Oasis credits, you're rich in real life. You can use those credits to pay rent to buy food, to pay your utilities, things like that.
Yeah.
So they didn't portray that in the movie very well.
Right.
That's interesting because that almost makes me think about people's fear of Bitcoin and it taking over and it being totally overvalued. So I think that's an interesting thing they brought up. And I do think it was right of them to switch the joust game out for the race because we definitely need some action near the beginning of this movie somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but of course, I've thought about this a million times, but how awesome would it have been to make those two playing that game a true 80s montage?
And if you don't know, if you're not familiar with the game of Joust is, it's, Doug, what do you say? They're ostriches?
One's on an ostrich, one's on a stork. You have jousts and you fly around, you joust each other, but there's also other birds flying around, guys on storks and everything. There's birds crapping out eggs that can drop on you. So you're battling NPCs as well as another player. So it's just
chaos,
a straight up battle royal. And to fly, you sit there and you tap, 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 fall a bit, tap, 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 so it's struggle with the hands. So I just see visions of the Demilich and Parzival playing and sweating and showing the scene while You're the Best Around from Karate Kid is playing in the background. I mean, that's just a montage that needed to be in the movie.
Absolutely.
So, they could have put him in the live action game of Joust in the Oasis. That would have given us
they do that
action.
a lot in the book. Not in this instance, but there are a couple video games that he literally has to play as the characters.
Yeah.
Another big difference between the movie and the book were the quests that everyone had to take. In the movie, to get the first key, he had to win a race. To win the second key, he had to go into The Shining, which then transformed into some kind of zombie video game that Halliday made back in the day. And then the third quest was to play a video game called Adventure. Fairly simple. Once they finished that quest, they got the key and they were able to move on to the next clue. Not so much in the book. In the book, after he beat a Sararak in the game of Joust, he was given a key and a clue that he had to follow and then find that clue where he was able to open a gate. Once inside the gate, he had to finish another quest. And in the book, he had to basically recreate the movie of War Games, word for word, playing the character of Matthew Broderick. The book literally talks about how light brightens and he's playing a Galaga game. And he's wondering why he's standing there. And all of a sudden, in the reflection, he's looking straight down and he sees a young Matthew Broderick. His voice sounds like Matthew Broderick. He looks like Matthew Broderick. He's literally acting out the movie. And that's the quest. He had to have the movie War Games memorized to finish this quest. And that's just to finish the first quest. In the second quest, they go deeper into video games. In the third quest, they go deeper into music. So the quests in the book are much more elaborate, much deeper, talks more and more about things from the 70s and the 80s, even some early 90s stuff. So a lot of nostalgia when it comes to the book.
And that was one of my favorite parts of the book is the amount of pulp culture that is crammed into this. I mean, you open up any page and I go through it and immediately it's like, oh, okay, now they're talking about She-Ra and music and songs and there's Flock of Seagulls. So I think that was really interesting. Now I do say I did like the beginning of The Shining part. I thought it was neat how they put the characters in actual footage from the film, and then some of it was changed a little bit. That was cool. And again, I guess they made the change because watching him recreate War Games as Matthew Broderick is just not. It's just not.
We're not
happen.
there yet when it comes to CGI,
right? But yeah, they make it that easy. It almost takes away the scavenger hunt feel that the book had. It's this, which leads you to this. And when you think you've got it, no, I got to go do this other thing now. Like to get the second one, he finds a recreation of a arcade from Halliday, the creator of the Oasis's hometown. And he plays Pac-Man and he plays a perfect game and he gets a quarter. And he's thinking like, I think this is part of it. Well, it's not. So he ends up getting a clue and he goes to another planet where he has to play the game of Zork, which is one of those text adventure games, go up, open door, stuff like that. And he plays that. He has to whistle a 2600 hertz sound through a Captain Crunch Bosun whistle, kind of whistle you find in the box of in the bottom of a cereal box. He has to do that.
That was real quick, Drew, on that whistle. That was a true thing that happened in the past. This guy found out that with this Captain Crunch whistle, he could blow it into a payphone and it made the exact same tone that it made when you threw in money. So
Really?
he was just going to the payphones, blowing that into the thing 20, 30 times or whatever, and he could call Japan and from a payphone.
That's awesome.
So he was one of the first hackers.
Yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but he was very popular because he hacked a phone.
Oh, wow.
A payphone.
Well, that's what he had to do here. He blew through the whistle, got that sound.
That's why that was part of the quest.
Yeah, and then that's how he was able to get the Jade Key. So it's a series of steps that they have to take to get there. I think the movie was well done for what they could work with, but it just takes away some of the.
Yeah, I was going to say the biggest issue with that is books can say whatever they want.
Right.
If I write a book, I'm pretty positive in this, I don't have to call Atari and say, hey, can I say the word Atari in my book?
No.
So, but when Steven Spielberg does a movie with whoever he did this with, well, War Games, I mean, I'm just making up names, but War Games was with Paramount. He's doing a movie with MGM. They don't want Paramount they don't want you spending money over here. So they're not going to do War Games. They're going to do a movie that they did. How about The Shining? That's pretty popular. Let's throw that in there. So that's one of the big things was there's just no way he could get the rights for every single thing. Because like Drew said, basically they wrote it's a decent book. There's some good twists in there. It's a good story. And then when they were done with that story, they called up Mr. T, had him put his finger down his throat, and he just puked on the book. And all the 80s from inside Mr. T came out and went into that book. Because I'm not kidding. You name something from the 80s, there's a very, very good chance it's mentioned in the book.
It's definitely in here.
Which is why I love the book.
Yeah. Now, Spielberg was able to acquire 80% of the rights that he wanted. He was trying to get the rights to Close Encounters, and believe it or not, even though he made the movie, he couldn't get the rights to it. So
different studio.
Yep. But he tried to keep some of his own, because there's a lot of references to Spielberg in the book too. And he's like, well, I don't want to put my own stuff in there because it looks like I'm patting myself on the back. So obviously the iconic DeLorean has to be in it. But it was a big difference. And I just kind of found that in the movie, when they're finding the keys, it seems like they found them a lot easier than they should have based on the book. Because it's like months and months in between finding the keys. It's not like I found it the next day. Oh, I got the next one. It was like 5 months later, he gets the second one.
Well, I want to say it's close to a year. I mean, the book takes place over like a year or two.
Yeah.
It takes a while. We're going to have another video talking about the characters, but there's a good 6-month period where Parzival does not have contact with any of the High Five.
Right.
And we'll go deeper into that. But yeah, so that was another major change.
Yeah, I understand they had to streamline the movie to get as much as they could into it, and there was just too many references in the book. But like, as somebody who loves visiting nostalgia, I would have liked to see maybe a TV show or something where they could have gone to Nintendo Land and Sega Land and then Grunge Land, 90s Music Land, and like like they did in the book. But they pretty much, it sounds like, had to pull all of those things into like one planet, essentially.
Yeah. Well, that's like the big fight
which
scene
makes
at the
sense,
end.
But I want to see that TV show.
Yeah. The big battle at the end, it's nothing like what we see in the film. The film, it's like every avatar you can possibly think of. Freddy Krueger is jumping around, Battletoads, Ninja Turtles, and
I will say,
which I did
he uses the knights from the Holy Monty Python and the Holy Grail. That's what he fights with in the book.
Yeah, he actually has. That's another thing in the book. He had to recreate the entire movie of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. That's one of the last in the last quests. He had to do so many different things just to get to the last thing playing adventure. He had to recreate the movie Monty Python. He had to play a video game as the video game character, not just going around. He literally had to play a video game, being sucked into a game, Black Tiger, which was, I believe, Black Dragon overseas. And he had to run and jump over these things and fight things. So, yeah, much more detailed in the book. We're going to be talking more about the differences between the book and the movie next week, August 26th at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. We'll talk to you later.